What is up, everybody? So a number of years ago, I was reading this blog I used to read every day, The Online Photographer, and he had this post about why don't cameras have style anymore, and does that matter? And he was kind of talking about, cameras just being, the Canons and Nikons, these kind of black, ugly blobs and all that. And I wrote a comment back saying, like, I love my film cameras. I think, vintage cameras look super cool. I was like, but as a working photographer, and this is what I was using at the time, the 5D4, this camera is just an extension of my hand. All the buttons are right where they need to be. I can hold this thing for hours when I'm shooting events. It's quick, it's fast. I don't care what it looks like. This design has been refined, over generation and generation of camera by Canon, and I felt like got to a point at the time where it was absolutely perfect. My buddy Kyle bought the X100S, I believe it was. Me and him had been on like a photographic journey together. We used to go out shooting together. We started to set up lights. We were reading, we were watching videos, we were learning techniques. And when he showed me a camera that looked something like this that was digital, I didn't understand it. We had both had, I think, digital Rebels first, and then I upgraded to the Canon 7D, which I thought was just amazing at the time. Why would you be taking a step backwards? But the thing that happened is he got busier into his career, had less time for photography. I was trying to become a professional photographer at the time. So when I looked at it, I'm like, that camera looks cool, but it doesn't make any sense. It started to click then for me what was going on. It was a cool looking camera, and I thought like, oh, it's a snapshot camera. That might sound like a put down, but at the time that was kind of my way of thinking. It's something he could carry to get good quality that looks cool, it's fast, it's easy to use type stuff like that, So it started to make a little bit of sense to me, but it was just we were on these diverging journeys at the time. Why go retro when they've absolutely perfected what a camera should be and they're only getting better? It's funny because as he got more into his career, he hires me to do the photo jobs now, and that was kind of the point. He had a camera so he could still take some photos when he needed to, but that wasn't what he was worrying about. That's what he could pay people like me to do. So, I just, on the design thing, you look and you even look at like a 70s Minolta, this is the XD11, my favorite 35 millimeter camera. And then once they got to the 80s with the X700, now there's a nub on the back and there's more of a hand grip. And that's what I'm saying. They just kept evolving and evolving. I think of these X100, 6s and the Vs that nobody could get before that, and their popularity, they're just the blend of so many right things. One, they do look cool, and shooting experience is part of shooting. It's one of the reasons that here's one of my old Fujis, that I love to shoot film. It's, for me, it also can be about slowing down with your dials and stuff like that. It's looking at your settings, knowing physically what your settings are, setting up, taking the shot. With film, obviously, you're more limited in how many shots and more, in tune with how many you want to take and like a little more cautious. But I still think it like probably holding a camera that is digital but has that vintage aspect gives you that same thing. As I've been messing around with the RZ67 with the digital back. It's kind of gigantic version of that, where a lot of the things are like kind of, making you more considerate of what you're doing. At the same time, you're still getting that digital image. So those cameras make a lot more sense to me now. And I also understand that it's like not everybody wants to sit there and edit images. So their film simulations, filters, if you will, makes a lot of sense too. It's like you could pick a look real quick, upload the photo, as we all know, Instagram, Facebook, stuff like that. But, the look is just already there. The reason why I wouldn't end up investing in these, even though they make sense, because they're quiet, they're more minimal. You're not going to stand out, say you're traveling or doing street photography. When you're holding something like this, people are like, why are you taking my picture? When you're holding something like this, you're just much more, you can get away with it much more, and it makes more sense to, you just don't look as much like a pro. But as I am a professional photographer, even with my hobby stuff, that's why I've really been loving the R8. I've been talking about this. I just did a cheap lens video. So much smaller, but still this like deep grip, this comfortable thing. We use this as a backup camera in our professional work, or if I'm double booked, my buddy Dave will take this one out. And it still just kind of has those, those modern ergonomics that are really fast, and it's still small. It's definitely not pocketable on the level of, the Fuji. Obviously, this isn't the Fuji, but it's roughly that size. And I get the pocketability, but this is still so lightweight, and with the small lenses, I could throw it over the shoulder. I still get interchangeable lenses, so I still get those options. And then, for me, I transfer the images over to Lightroom. do some edits before I post them, even if they're just going onto simple, social media type stuff. But that's me, and I know that's personal. And, so yes, if this camera needs to, and it's the R5 that I'm shooting on, that would normally be in my hand, which is, between these two, but it's just there. Everything works. I could, all the buttons are there. And literally at an event, sometimes that camera is just not leaving my hands for 4 hours. So that kind of thing just becomes super important to me. But yeah, it's kind of cool just getting older and getting more like aware of all the different ways things would be shot, and like less judgmental and more understanding of like, I see the niche for this camera. It just combines the X100VI. It just combines so many elements, and that's what makes it so popular, And like I said, shooting experience does matter. Like liking what you're working with, especially if you're doing it, and again, not a put down as a hobby. It's like you want something that, $1,500, when I was a hobbyist, it was a ton of money because it wasn't a tool that was going to make me money. Granted, it's still a lot of money to me, but to spend I think this was $3,500. The camera I'm filming on was $3,800. This was $1,500, so comparable to the Fuji, but they're still big decisions, right? And they're especially big decisions if it's not a return on investment. So yeah, you want something that makes you feel good, but that also is very functional and does what you can. As I mentioned, like the slow down type thing of like shooting film cameras, I do believe that those Fujis still have like, you could override the mechanical dials with like modern dials. So it's not that slow, but personally, I've never been a huge rangefinder guy. So like say I was just doing this for fun and I was looking at that kind of camera to have something to carry around instead of like what I do a lot with the R8, I think I would still default towards something like this because I have just never, I use this QL17-3 a lot shooting film till it died because I like the size compared to my SLRs, but I just always like that looking through the lens thing over the rangefinder. And I know the Fujis have a digital one, but the off-center and all that stuff is just in general not my cup of tea. And retro styling wise, other brands have definitely jumped on board. Leica's always kind of stuck with that. And then Fuji, I always kind of felt like was kind of copying the Leica style and then bringing the cost down so it could be stuff that, regular human beings can afford. But yeah, then Nikon has kind of jumped on the bandwagon. Their first attempt at it didn't make a lot of sense to me with the crop sensor, and it just felt kind of limited. It looked really cool. Nikon, I think, has made the coolest looking cameras forever. Yeah, I think Nikons have always been rad, but that camera didn't make a lot of sense. And then one of the cool things too about the vintage cameras is the really cool looking vintage lenses. I just absolutely love the way the focus rings are and the aperture rings. And so like when Nikon does it with interchangeable lenses, there's only, I think, ever been, I think there were only 2 or 3 lenses, correct me if I'm wrong, for that original ZFC. And now they have the more full frame capable one, I think isn't it just a ZF? But again, it's like, I don't really understand the trade-off in that case. I think it makes a lot more sense for the Fuji and something that's just a simple all-in-one small, a lot more affordable, and like the kind of features that, someone who was shooting more of like travel, just your non-professional work, it just makes a lot more sense for things like that. So yeah, that's just my opinion on like why it's so popular. And I think it makes a lot of sense. Personally, I'm sticking with the ugly because I am all about function over form. As my goal has just always been to make the best images possible when I'm working. But that's why when I do want to do something more unique and slow down, it's back to film photography for me. And it has been for now about 12 years. So anyways, for someone deeply immersed in the photography world who watches the YouTube video reviews and reads blogs like Petapixel and stuff, just my 2 cents on the camera that's just been like kind of dominating the news lately, which is until today when Nikon goes and buys red cameras. So, but that'll be for another time. Thanks as always for watching. Give this video a like. See you in the next one.